My name is Sinead Naughton. My student number is 17167043, and this is my final presentation for my software development project. My project name and application are called Vestimony. The presentation overview. So firstly, I'm going to give an introduction to the project. I'm then going to talk about the software design and architecture. I'm then going to look at some of the pieces of the implementation for the project in more detail. There'll be a live demo of the application, and then I'm going to look at kind of just very briefly challenges that I faced during creating it. So firstly is the introduction. This will outline the context for the idea, why it was needed, and what Vestimony is. So one of the first things for the context for the idea was the rise of online shopping, and specifically online shopping for clothing and fashion. So you can see here I have two statistics from a recent PwC survey carried out in Ireland, that 30% of consumers expect their mobile phone will be their main shopping tool for the future, and that 80% of participants had bought clothing and footwear online. This is not just a trend in Ireland, it's obviously a global trend. You can see another statistic down here from America, that 96% of Americans shop online and 43% of them purchase fashion online. The next thing in the context for the application was the rise of social commerce applications and social media influencers. So social media influencers are basically the people who post most of the content on social media applications. And they're called influencers because they have a massive role in marketing and in influencing people's purchasing decisions. And you can see here a statistic from the same PwC survey said that 94% of 18 to 24-year-olds use social media to inspire their purchases. They're solely using it for this reason. And you can see here there's Instagram. So this is kind of one of the first applications that started this. And you can see here that people post kind of style and fashion things, and that actually because this became so popular and is a marketing thing, Instagram introduced a kind of a link to buy where you can link directly to the store. And here is another example of an application called 21 Buttons. But this actually started as a social commerce application. So it started with the idea that influencers can post pictures of what they're wearing, and then that there would be direct links of where to find this in stores, so people could just directly link and buy it, because before that was a major issue with people seeing the content on Instagram but not knowing where the person bought it or anything like that. So this kind of solved the problem of knowing where someone bought something and of increasing this kind of buying behaviour. But there are still a few barriers that it doesn't solve. So, people still don't know enough about the item that they're purchasing online. Many people who purchase in store, they value the opinion and the knowledge of the sales assistant. As you can see down here, information again from PwC that 81% said that a sales assistant with a deep knowledge was important to them. And then as well, so these applications don't kind of address that. The person might post a picture of what they bought, they might say where you can buy it, but they don't necessarily give you more information about the item that you might need when making a purchasing decision that you would have if you were in person physically in front of the item. And then as well, many store websites don't offer review functionality, so the person can't even go to the store to get this type of thing. And then the main barrier to all of this really is that when you purchase something online, if it's not correct, you'll have to return it. So a lot of people are put off by kind of costly returns. And the same PwC survey as well said that 69% of people consider free returns really, really attractive, but loads of retailers still don't offer that. So this solving these problems is basically what Vestimony was formed around. So basically giving people more information about the fashion item and then hopefully reducing the risk of returns. So what is Vestimony? So Vestimony is a social commerce application. So users can post fashion inspiration, but then as well as posting that fashion inspiration, they can also link directly to where you can buy those items, but also give a review on the item with practical advice and tips for the user if they would like to purchase that item as well. So you can see here in the center one, we have a picture, a screenshot of a post on Vestimony. So here is the image for the post of the user wearing the items. And then below it, you can see that they have a vestimonial for the item, and a vestimonial is the name given for a review. So you can see that the item is linked. They let you know what size they bought, what size they normally are, and it's cut off the screen here. Below that, there's a rating for the item, and then below that, there's just more comments, a link to buy it, etc. So, as well as following people for fashion inspiration on Vestimony, it can be very, very useful because if a user is looking to buy something online from a store that, don't offer reviews and you don't really know enough information, you'd like to see the item in real life as opposed to just on the store website, you can actually go directly to Vestimony's catalogue of items, search for what you're looking for by brand and by category, and then look at the item. And then with that will be displayed an aggregated kind of overall review or rating for the items. This one is 4.5 stars. And then from the reviews as well, a size recommendation. So should you go bigger, should you go smaller if you're intending to buy this item? The number of people who've saved it. And then as well, listed below, you can look at posts of people wearing the item. So you can see it in real life, what did it look like on a person as opposed to the store's model. And then if you'd like as well, you can actually click on this tab, which will take you directly to the vestimonials for the item. So basically the vestimonials are all contained directly within the post, but sometimes you might not want to go and click on a post and go to the vestimonial, and so if you click on this tab, it'll just show you a full list of vestimonials directly, so you can just quickly scan the information. There'll also be a link to go to the store to buy it, and then also a link or a little functionality to save the item, so you can come back and have a look later if you're not yet ready to buy. So that's basically what Vestimony is, and that the reviews or the vestimonials being its kind of unique selling point. And now we're just going to move on to looking at the software design and the architecture. So here we're going to look at what are the functional requirements for Vestimony, what's the system architecture, how is it hosted, and what testing was done. So the functional requirements for Vestimony, they're listed here in this use case diagram. But basically, it revolves around the user being able to register an account, sign in, sign out, the user being able to add a post, and to that post, the user must be able to link or add a new vestimonial. The user being able to view someone else's profile and follow it if they wish. The user is being able to view a post and view vestimonials for that post. Being able to like that post so they can come back and look at kind of a curated section of posts that they liked later. And then as well, the system having an online catalogue of items that you can buy online, fashion items that you can buy online, being able to search this catalogue, view items, link directly to buy them, or save them for later if you wish. An overview of the architecture of the system. So Vestimony, if I haven't already mentioned, its end use is intended as an Android mobile application. It is a distributed system. So you can see here the architecture for this, it has a backend database created in MySQL. This then connects to a RESTful API that was created in Spring. A web client created in Angular then requests information from the API and retrieves a response. And then for the Android application part, basically an Android app was created in Android Studio, and this just outputs the web client in its view. So just to briefly touch on each of those then in slightly more detail. So the database, as I mentioned, is MySQL. It's a relational database, and MySQL was chosen because I already had experience using it, and it's used by large companies like Facebook. For the database, well, you can see an entity relationship diagram is here for how entities relate to each other and map out. And object relational mapping with JPA and Hibernate were used to create the database as well. So for the API then, Spring Boot was used for the API. It used the Java programming language, which I already had experience with, and it's Spring itself is one of the most widely used frameworks in the industry. And Spring Boot was chosen because it comes with a lot of the configuration done, so it makes development much, much faster. And then it's also a RESTful API. So what this means basically is that endpoints, which are URLs, are exposed, and by accessing these endpoints, you can access the resources of the API. And then just this diagram here, this isn't the architecture of the API because it's missing the models and it's missing security and so on, but this is just more so how data is passed throughout the API basically. very roughly speaking. So there's a front end controller. This then goes to a specific REST controller depending on the URL. REST controllers then request either one or more services to carry out some operations for them, and then services pull information from the repositories, and then the data is sent back through then to be sent back to the client that requested it. The web client then is built in Angular. This uses TypeScript programming language, chosen because of TypeScript and its type checking and the popularity of Angular in industry. And an overview of the web client can be seen here. So basically, when you start up the client, it starts with this file called main.ts. This bootstraps the app module as the first thing that needs to start in the application. This brings up the app component, which is basically a template for the application. The app component contains our header and our navigation, and it contains this router outlet in the middle. And this router outlet is the thing in Angular that will basically outlet whatever component is specified in it. So in this way, when the user is navigating around the app, whatever they've requested, then all of these different components that are mapped out here for the views are output into this router outlet. The data services then is basically the bit that requests information from the API and sends the data into the components. So the Android application then, as I've mentioned before, the Android application simply just outputs the web client as its web view. It was built in Android Studio. Hosting was done on Heroku. And this was very easy to do as all of the source code was already on GitHub, so it was just pulled from there into the Heroku Git. And then the testing, I'm not going to go into detail on here just because of time, but there was unit testing and integration testing done, which were done iteratively and incrementally. System testing was then done on all the different paths in the system using correct and incorrect inputs, and then user testing with the walkthrough model was carried out as well. I'm just going to talk about now some of the implementation for the application in a little bit more detail. So what I'm going to talk about here is I'm going to talk about the API endpoints and the client services and how these two connect to each other. I'm going to talk about security for the application, and I'm going to talk about web crawlers. So to do this, I'm going to have a look at the application code. And we're going to start here with Spring Boot open. So firstly, these endpoints are all stored in the specific controllers. So we're going to go to an application user controller, and you can see here that the URL is specified firstly for the controller. This one is Vestimony/users, and then for the method. So when a user goes to a specific URL or the client requests information from a specific URL, it gets mapped to a specific method within a controller, which is how RESTful APIs work. And then basically that controller just carries out a job. It calls the services that it needs to call. It creates a response entity and it just sends it back then. So we will go into the Angular client now and just look at where the information is requested and picked up as well. So as I said, there's a services layer in the Angular client, and in here in Vestimony API, we can see that the profile data service is where we would make these requests. So basically the data services are purely just to request data from the API and retrieve it back. So you can see here the get profile one, it has that RESTful, that URL in here, and then it leaves the profile bit so you can enter whatever profile ID is appropriate at the time. The start of the URL is left here because this is basically configured by if you're in, as I may have mentioned before, there's a live version of the application and a version that you can kind of just look at locally as well. So this is configured depending on whether you're in localhost or you're looking at the live version on Heroku. And then headers are appended then to form the request as well. So basically the headers are just the content type and the authorization, which is a web token that tells the API if the user should be authorized to see the information they requested or not. Basically the response is retrieved back. So the data service layer and the API controller is how the two kind of communicate with each other. And talking about the authorization header brings us nicely onto security. So we're now just going to briefly look at how security is done. So basically, It uses token authorization, it uses Spring Security and JSON Web Token to do this. There's a package in the API called security. And in this package, first there's security configuration. So this basically says what routes can be looked at without needing this token in your request headers, and what routes can't. Then when a user logs in, it also requests from custom user detail service that they look up the user, username, password, make sure they're both correct in the database before they grant the token and grant access. And then there's two other parts of this then as well. So there's the authentication, which is basically responsible for creating the token. So if the user does exist on the system, then we take the user details from that request and we basically create a JSON Web Token here. And then this next one, JSON authorization, this is just responsible then, that token that got sent back to the client, it gets sent then with every request while the client is logged in. It's just responsible for checking that the token is still valid and correct and that the user should still be allowed to see the information. But just to quickly look as well at how this token is dealt with on the client side. So in services, we also have auth services. So auth token services or auth token service makes the request to log in, sending the username and password in the body. It then accepts back the response, and from the response it extracts from the headers the authorization header. And then auth user service is then responsible for storing this token in local storage, and then any request going out can access local storage, and they can just say give me the access token, and they can send it in the headers. Then when a user logs out, this here just destroys the access token then. So the final bit of implementation we're quickly going to look at is web crawlers. So this is a service within the API. Basically, because the application, as we mentioned before, has a catalogue of items that are available to purchase online, this catalogue needs to be somehow populated with entities or with items. So basically, this is done through the use of web crawlers. So there's a service called the web crawler service. And then this has different methods depending on what site you're crawling. At the moment, there are only 5 just due to resources and time. So what these methods basically do is they basically use UniRest to get information from a particular web page. This information, when it's pulled back or scraped, is stored in a HTTP response. And then JSON path is then used to find kind of paths in the JSON to specific bits of information that you want, and then these are stored in the result name. So for instance, just to quickly look at the Topshop new in page, you can see here that this is the request that was sent. And then you can see here, this is a preview of the information that was sent back. So by following this JSON and using it to build out the JSON path, we can see results, then go to contents, then go to 0, then go to records, and then each one of these numbers is a different record. And we can see we want the color, we want the the product name, we want the now price, and so on. And you can see here that these paths then are here. So result.contents 0.records, and then we have a loop here just to loop through every record that is in records and give me the name, give me the now price, the color, and so on. It also takes the image URL, and then with that URL through a byte stream, it takes in the image and stores that directly in the database as well, creates a new item then, and then before it stores that item in the database, it just makes sure that it doesn't already exist, and it does this by its URL. If it does exist, it doesn't store it again, but if it doesn't, it stores the item then in the database. So now we're going to do a demo of the live application. There are kind of 2 versions of the application that were submitted. One is files to set up a local version of the application just on your local host. And then the next version is the live one. This is the one that's hosted on Heroku, and what we're going to use to demo it is Angular Studio and the emulator on that. Just to state that the live version is a little bit slower than the local host version. This is just because a very inexpensive database has been used. So data retrieval can be a little slow. So we have our application here. And just to point out, just behind our application is kind of a map of the client and the different pages that we're going to be looking at. So you can see there's sign in and register. So when the user first gets to the application, they have the option, they can't view the navigation bar. That's another security measure in the client. So the auth token we spoke about earlier, if the client does not have an auth token in local storage, the application uses logic to not show the navigation bar. So in this way, if a user is not logged in, all they can see is the sign in page or the registration page. So also, if a user doesn't have an auth token, it directs them to the sign in page. If they do have an auth token when they come here, it directs them to the home page, because an auth token can last for a day. So you can see here that a user can register for an account. This is using the Angular Forms module and two-way data binding. So when a user enters information about themselves, and we can enter the password and just an email, and then here they can click this button, continue to registration. This is basically just unhiding information that had been hidden using an ng if statement. So if this is true, don't show this, otherwise show it, or thereabouts. And as I mentioned before, this is two-way data binding. So when you type into these fields, they're automatically taken inside in the Angular component in the TypeScript file, and they're bound to a field, an application user field that's already there. So as soon as you enter all this information and you input all the information about the users, so their height and all, to help other users know, would items they're purchasing be the right length for them, and a user can enter what size they are. And I'm just going to click on register. This isn't going to work, but I just want to demonstrate to you why. Now, this username already exists in the system. A username has to be unique, one, to find a user on the system, and two, for the login. So it'll let you know if it does, and it'll just ask you to choose another username. It'll do the same for email. But instead of registering another account, we're going to demonstrate sign in this case. So I'm going to sign in as Sinead. And I'm just going to click sign in here. So you can see now that we have signed in. What we spoke about with security earlier has been done. So we've gone to the API, we've made our request to sign in with our username and our password. The API has sent back a response, and the headers, one of the headers was the authorization, which gave us our token. Now that the token is present, it will display the navigation bar. So this is the home page here, which you can see here. So on the home page, there's an option of two different views. And these views are both made up of nested components. So one is the trending view. This is basically posts that have been created within the last month, ordered by which ones have the most likes. Or there's the following view, and following is posts from users that you are following, ordered by the most recent. So here you can see, and basically these work by ng ifs, just like the bit that we spoke about in the registration. So when one of them is clicked, it makes a certain property true, which means the other is not displayed, and then when the other is clicked, it makes that property false, which means the other is not displayed. So we can see here, this here is a post tile that we can see right in front of us. So it has the image of the post, a little caption which actually has been truncated because it's a bit too long. It shows you how many people like it, and because you can see this love heart here is in pink, you can see that you actually like the post. You can see who it's posted by, and this love heart in pink, you can actually unclick that, and now you've unliked it, and we can like it again and it goes back up. So this post tile, you can actually click directly on that and it will actually take you directly to the post. So now you can see the full information that they posted about it. You can still see how many likes, but as well as that, you can now see the vestimonials that user created for the items they're wearing in the post that they've linked to the post. So the first one is for the jeans. You can see here they've shown you the size they bought, their usual size, what they'd rate them, a bit of information they gave about them. From here, you can either click on the little image of the item and it'll take you directly to the item view, where you can find out more information about the item, or you can click directly to buy, or you can save the item for later, which, as you can see, this is already in pink, so you've already saved this item. But so just to take you back to the home page that we were on now. So you can see just below the posts, we saw that there was a person's profile. So you can actually click on that as well, and you'll be brought to their profile. You show how many followers they have, if you're following them, which you are, how many posts they have, and then just list below that all the posts that they've posted. So that's basically the home view. It's just two different types of lists of posts. And the next view that we're going to move on to looking at is the search. So you can see here, the search is here and has a nested component. So basically search either displays, you can either search items or you can search profiles. So this is the view to search an item. And if you can basically select what brand you'd like to search by or what category of item you'd like to search by. You can select one of each of these. These are kind of custom made, almost radio buttons. So when you click one of them, it makes all the others false and that one true. And then in that way it's input into the search filter that's sent to the API. And when you first come to the page, there's just a list of items that are displayed, and these are just the newest items that have been added to the application. You can see this is an item tile component here. Just gives you an image of the item, the name of the item. It gives you the price for the item, if there's a rating. If you have saved it, it will appear in pink. If you haven't, it will appear in black, and how many saves that there are. So before we leave this, we're just going to quickly do a little search to demonstrate that. So we're just going to search by Topshop and by jeans, and you can see Topshop and jeans populated here. If you change your mind and want to search tops instead, tops will be input. You say get my item. This sends the request to the API and the data is sent back, and now you can see it's all Topshop tops that are shown. Just another note about the items as well, something that's been done to optimize how fast the items get displayed or how quick this page loads is that a module or a component, called InView that's available in Angular has been used. And basically, this lets a property know or a component know if it's in view or not. So in the in view event has been put on the HTML for the item tile. If it's in view, then it knows that it should load the data. If it's not in view, it shouldn't. And this is done for the posts as well. And this is just to stop the page taking ages to load when you first come to it. By default, it just loads the first 4, and then it loads the others as they come into view, as you can see there. Oh, well, there's only that number of items on this page. So that is searching for an item. These as well are on horizontal scrolling, just to make it more visually appealing, easy for the user to scroll across. It's also not words, so anyone of any language can kind of use this because you're just picking out the pictures, and again you're just picking out the brand logo. This is on scroll as well. These have just been duplicated at the end because, as I mentioned before, there's only 5 web crawlers. You can also search by profile. So if you enter a profile name, so let's just look for people who have this in their profile name, it'll just go back with a wildcard, kind of a string with fat in it, and it'll search for users who have that in their profile name, and then you can click on their profile and have a look. One thing that I didn't show when we were on the item page is to click on. So we're going to sort by rating, and now we're going to click on this item, and you can see here this has 4.5 stars. It's got 1 save. People recommend getting half a size bigger, and you can see just below it are the posts that contain it. Or if you want to click here and instead just have a quick scan over just the reviews themselves, so you can quickly just read about it. You can also link to buy from the item. So you can go directly to the store, or you can save the item. You can see this appearing in pink, so you've already saved it, and there you've unsaved and saved it again. So from here the user can add a post. So first they would just enter a caption for the post, and then they would choose a file. So from here they can either choose to take an image of their outfit from their camera right now, or choose to use an image that they've already taken earlier that's stored in their files in their phone. We're going to use the camera now. Because we're using the emulator, it's not actually going to take an image of their outfit, obviously. It's just going to take this, but that'll do for now. So we're just going to take the photo, and we're going to select, and we're going to say yeah, so we want to use that photo. The user can then crop the photo. So this is using NGX image cropper, which basically lets you say what kind of ratio you want your images to have, and then it provides all of this functionality to show the preview, to crop it, and then by scrolling down, sorry, it's just loading. So you can see your preview here of the photo you've selected. You can confirm your post details. Again, this would be an outfit, obviously. And now appears a link to either add a new vestimonial or link an existing vestimonial. So in this case, we're going to choose to add a new vestimonial. So this here brings us back to the item search page. So we can search through, look for our item that we want to link or add the vestimonial for, or we can change our mind and say actually we want to link a vestimonial that we've done already. So here is where we just add the vestimonial. So let's say if the person was wearing jeans in this picture and we know that they're jeans from Topshop, we would just link those, and if it's these ones, and then the person would just select Vestify. This now brings them to a form, and they have to fill in all of these details before they'll be allowed to submit the form. So they can just say something like, I love these jeans, and then they can tell people the size they bought, and they can also say their regular size, and they can give a rating for them. They can now either submit the vestimonial and complete the post, they can submit and they'll be brought to link another vestimonial, because you can link as many as you want, or they can submit and they can create a new vestimonial. So we're just going to submit and complete the post in this instance. So you can see obviously it doesn't look like a post should look because our image is incorrect, but that's basically how you add a post and a vestimonial. And then there's also a section here for the user to look at their own account. They can see their account information. They can edit their profile image. This just brings up the same image file uploader and cropper that we saw on the last one. Or they can edit their account details, just opens down a form. Sorry, as I said, it's a bit slow to load sometimes. And you can cancel or save the changes. Shows them how many people are following them and how many posts they have, and then from here the user can also log out, and from here you can see the navigations bar is gone because the JSON Web Token is gone, and they are brought to the sign in page again. So that concludes our demo of the application, and now I'm just going to briefly discuss what the challenges were for the application, and just briefly kind of how they were overcome, just very, very quickly. So the first challenge was basically learning the frameworks. I had to learn Spring Boot and obviously parts of Spring such as Spring MVC, JPA, Java Persistence API, things like that from scratch, as well as learning the Angular framework. Now, because of this, it had been intended to learn native script as well as Angular to build a mobile application in this way. That, just to be realistic for time and the amount of frameworks to learn, had to be dropped. So I just learned Spring Boot and Angular. And then, as I said, did Android Studio then to hold the application in NAP. The next so that was the frameworks and basically just the amount of information that there was to learn. Another thing that was a challenge was the hosting, and specifically I think cores, it not allowing kind of cores requests with the hosting, and trying to overcome that by having like the @cores annotation in the API, but eventually I realized that I actually had to create a service just to configure the request for cores, so they were able to go through. And then the next thing was that was definitely a challenge, was all of the configuration in, I suppose, setting up all of the development environments, learning the frameworks, things like the cores, like I said, configuring it. The security was definitely a big thing, the web controllers, and just all of the kind of configurations that need to be done to enable things to work. But all in all, it was mostly, the biggest challenge was just, I suppose, the time to get the application done. But I think that there is a pretty good result in the end. All of the functionality that I set out to do in the first place has been met, and I think the application in whole functions pretty well and does what it intended to do. So that is the end of the presentation, and thank you very much for taking the time. Goodbye.